This is a football show, Monday edition. He's Zach. I'm Braden. We are live from the Cats Collective studio, of course, here in the heart of Nashville on Music Row. That's 2 shows in a row that I got that correct.
Look at you.
I know. We'll see if I can get it right at the end of the show. Of course, if you want to book a space here in this wonderful, beautiful place, make sure you slide up into the DMs at cast_collective on the Instagram. Of course, Zach, what do people need to do on the YouTube page and all across all the great platforms right now?
Share everything, retweet, quote tweet, turn on notifications, do everything that you need to do to be able to make sure that you not only catch us live, but all your friends and family and enemies catch you live. We'll take anybody.
Enemies.
Yeah.
Enemy. What about neighbors, pets?
Those are included in friends and
Okay,
family,
all right.
right? I mean, like, or enemies.
I like it. I like frenemies as well.
Yeah.
Best frenemies. That's like my 2 daughters. They're best frenemies every single day. All right. Fun show for you guys, of course, today. We're going to talk about some players that we expect to level up for the Tennessee Titans. Guys like, I'm going to have to ask you to clarify sort of the definition. Is does Christian Fulton count as already leveled up? He's already leveled up, right?
Did he make a Pro Bowl?
Oh.
Did he make All Pro? So he still got, has he made the Hall of Fame? He still got time.
Hall of Fame. He's not a Hall of Famer yet after a year of football. Okay, so then Christian Fulton could potentially still level up again. So we're going to talk about some players later on in the show that we think could level up. We're big believers of no empty calories on the show. That's sort of our ethos. It's quickly becoming the philosophy of the program. And I think the casual summer topic for a lot of teams, football especially, is, are they under the radar? Are they under the radar? The Titans, the Vols, other teams in the SEC, are they under the radar? We are not going to discuss whether or not a specific team is under the radar. We're just going to tell you where they are on the radar, and then we're going to discuss whether or not that's fair or not. So a little bit different, a little bit smarter, of course, for the SEC and for the Tennessee Titans. And we'll take a look at minicamp that's coming up here as well. I also have a statement for a friend of mine that includes a topic that, of course, is everywhere across the internet this weekend for Titans fans. You can see the look on his face that we're going to talk about A.J. Brown's Twitter account. Before we do that, however, of course, reminder that the Kingston Group is our proud sponsor here on a football show. You can, of course, check them out at buildkg.com, locally owned custom home and remodeling firm here in Nashville. If you're going to make a big decision about your house, make sure you talk to the great and wonderful, amazing people at the Kingston Group. That's buildkg.com. Football and Other F Words podcast, all the other great shows from the Full 40 Sports Network. I think that's everything. BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We've gotten to everything, Zach.
I think you covered it all.
Okay, so let's begin with a statement that I'd like to make for, these are not prepared remarks. This is from the heart.
Oh, okay.
This is from here. And I would just like to say that a friend, a colleague, a former wide receiver, Derek Mason, is the best wide receiver in Titans franchise history. There's not a discussion about this. It's not a debate. It's not something you guys can have a beer about and argue on your deck. It's on Twitter. It's even worse. Derek Mason is the best wide receiver in franchise history. I've said as much to Derek Mason in an interview about A.J. Brown when A.J. Brown was doing all the amazing things that he's been doing. And Derek Mason even agreed that A.J. Brown could, in theory, one day be the best wide receiver in franchise history should he play as long as Derek played in a Titans uniform. And Derek agreed with me. So, Derek, the crown is still yours, my friend, because A.J. Brown will no longer be producing numbers for the Tennessee Titans and therefore will not move up any of the lists and therefore will not be the best wide receiver in franchise history. Now, and Derek has agreed with me on this as well, if we are talking about the most physically gifted player to play that position in franchise history, then we can have a discussion about A.J. Brown. In fact, I might agree, and I think Derek agrees, that he is probably the most physically gifted player to ever play at that position for this franchise, Houston or Tennessee. So I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I don't think that Titans Twitter needs to do any more than that. I don't think AJ.
I tell you, they what they need to do more of, shutting the fuck up. This guy, this Henry Given Sunday guy that has destroyed my timeline because of this nonsense. I mean, you got articles being written, Bleacher Report picking it up. I think ESPN picked it up because he couldn't just stay away from A.J. Brown, who, by the way, is a moron in and of itself because he doesn't even know how precipitation percentages work in the weather industry. And that's why he's being called not only a villain, a stupid villain. Well, at this point,
you live in the sewers, man.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you're going to talk about this conversation and not do the research on it before you get in here, but
I don't want to live in the sewers. I don't need to do research.
Then
on
why
this
are we
topic.
talking about this topic?
Because I wanted to make a statement, and I wanted to say the truth. The truth has been said, and that's the end of that part of it.
Yeah.
I do think what's interesting, and you and I were talking before the show, is that I'm starting to get more and more insight into who AJ Brown is.
Yeah, he's an insecure little bitch.
And wow.
Yeah, hey, look at this point, I don't give a fuck about AJ Brown. So if he listen, he may actually watch this show because he's so insecure. We'll probably have AJ Brown mentioned somewhere, and he's gonna find it because he probably Googles his name 30 times a day.
You guys can tell how Zach feels about this.
Yeah, I'm so sick of talking about AJ Brown, who's not even a player on the Tennessee Titans.
That's what I would say to people is, like, we've established the truth. Let's move on from it. Also, unfollow.
Yeah.
Like, what does it matter? Like, I don't understand why people are still paying attention. I'm with you. I don't understand why people still care. So if he wants to get in and argue about it, that's up to him and you. And just like me, I choose not to get into the sewers on that. I like bathing in other sewers on the Twitter sphere. But that one in particular, I unfollowed him on the day after he was traded, and I just haven't noticed it since. Now, I do have I do think that AJ, and I'll tell this story from last year at camp real quickly here, and that is that me and Tehran and I think another guy, I can't remember who, forgive me, we're standing next to on the third field, whatever,
the evil
secret field, and they're throwing passes around, kind of just like BSing. It's not like a drill or anything. They're not doing any actual work. And AJ's standing there, and Tehran and I are kind of like joking with him. He's going up and doing one-handed catches because he's one of the most physically gifted players ever, and whatever. And we kind of joke, and we're like, all right, you got to do that in a game. You got to do that in a game. And he goes, no, not a game, not a Sunday game, a Monday night game, a Sunday night game. So again, purely anecdotal, but what his brain was telling him, and what his natural inclination is to say, I need to make a big star-like play to build my brand, but it needs to be on this platform so that I get the most out of it. And it doesn't matter if I do it on a Sunday against the Giants at Nissan Stadium at noon or whatever. And it doesn't mean anything. Some guys are capable of doing both. Taylor Lewan, right? But it's one of those little nuggets now that I'm seeing him be insecure on all these platforms that, like, you know what? That was an indicator that he's pretty focused on this from day one.
Yeah. Well, you go back to when he was on Bussin' with the Boys, and he talked about he's an alpha. He's the best wide receiver. That's his mindset and everything. And for a guy who supposedly has this mindset, he really doesn't even act like a beta. He acts like a gamma. Like, he is a gamma male. I mean, he acts like he has a third tier confidence issue in my mind. He is a subpar personality, and I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of having to talk about AJ Brown, because every time I think we're going to be out of the woods, I turn around, there's another Titans fan antagonizing a guy who is going to antagonize back because he has such a low opinion of himself. AJ Brown has no self-confidence. Yeah, and that's how I view it, because he is looking for who he is on the internet. He's not looking for who he is in real life instances. Jimmy Garoppolo says, I'm not defined by what's said about me on the internet. Why do I care about what's said on the internet? Whereas AJ Brown is defined, in his mind, he is defined by the people that love him and the people that hate him.
Yeah.
Complete strangers that he supposedly doesn't give a shit about. It's just I'm so tired of talking about this guy. I'm trying to put it into words. I'm this guy who does not give a shit about the Titans fans that love him. Obviously, he doesn't give a shit. He only gives a shit about the negative noise, and he is so full of himself. But he lacks a sense of confidence, and I hate having to week after week dedicate, because that's our job, right? We may not like the story, but we have to dedicate a little bit of time to it.
And hopefully do it again, to me, this was about Derek Mason.
Yeah.
This to me is about Derek Mason, not really about AJ Brown. It's impossible to talk about it without including all that other
Derek
stuff.
Mason handled it poorly. Let's talk about that little tweet that he put out talking about fans forget the old guard or whatever. I think that's necessarily, again, you're doing what AJ does and paying attention to a vocal minority on the internet.
Are you okay with it because he's in the media and his job is to sort of drive engagement now too?
Oh no, I don't give a shit about that.
Right.
So I know media people tend to be put on a higher pedestal, but at this point, there's no difference between media and Twitter, because they are all doing the same thing, which is perpetuating a non-news story, and they do it with not just this story, but with other stories.
Yeah, I'm okay with a guy in the media who is specific.
Sponsored by Smartwater, by the way.
I think I'm okay with a former athlete who is still in the market, working in the media, defending his position of an active player.
But don't take a swipe at the fans, because that's my thing, is that that makes you look very petty. That loses the whole message of what it is.
I think both guys. I think a lot of athletes can learn that lesson. I'm surprised Jimmy Garoppolo is the level-headed one in all of this. By the way, 2,700 yards all-purpose 1 year for Derek Mason.
Yeah,
it's not a discussion who the best receiver in franchise history is. That's what I wanted to make sure I conveyed today on the show. Had A.J. Brown played 10 years here, I think he would have blown through every single record and been the greatest of all time. But that's not what happened, so we can move on.
And there's also a difference between, again, this goes back to leadership versus mentor, the difference there. There's a difference between best and most talented.
Yeah. Why is that hard to understand?
Well, it's because I guess 5 years before I graduated high school, the education system must have failed, because you're talking about 32-year-olds, 31-year-olds who still can't grasp these definitions.
You might be closer to the truth than anyone wants to admit.
Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to get that out there, and I know it's going to dominate coverage, of course, across the landscape for Titans fans. And if you want to make it part of your diet, go ahead. I just wanted to defend Derek Mason for a second, and then we can move on. Or 10 minutes, whatever. All right, mandatory minicamp starts. And along the same lines of this A.J. Brown nonsense, I do sort of wish that there's like 11 holdouts tomorrow on Tuesday, just so that we can have more what feels like not trolling from the Titans, because I think there's not really a contract issue, right? Like, you don't see a player holding out like in the traditional sense.
I'm waiting for maybe there's just nobody cares about the Tennessee Titans in national media, but I'm waiting for a Diana Rossini tweet that says Derrick Henry's in for his physical, or Jeffrey Simmons is in for his physical, because those two guys kind of do matter, that you kind of want to hear coming in for the physical. And there are supposed contract situations surrounding Derrick Henry, and there is a contract situation overhanging Jeffrey Simmons. So you kind of want that.
Yep.
Then that's one of the storylines for me to watch, is you kind of want that. You want at least those guys to be in the building and want some clarity, because what you're seeing is, while the contract looms around him and they're still trying to work through a contract, Kyler Murray showed up for OTAs. Lamar Jackson showed up for OTAs, similar fashion. Terry McLaurin has not shown up for OTAs because they're still far apart on their contract negotiations. So in my mind, while it's still not a big issue if they don't show up, I think it is a sign that, okay, there is something looming now between June to when training camp starts to get a contract hammered out for these two players.
It's the next step that pushes it closer to that, but it's not anything to be overly super concerned. Again, part of me, just the troll inside of me that does, I like some of the tours on Twitter, kind of wants it to just be like, oh, Derrick Henry's not here.
Yeah,
Derrick Henry contract negotiation dispute, Derrick Henry, and for it to not be an issue at all, like just like asthma gate, like it's not a thing. Because otherwise, if you look across the roster, there's no real like contractual situation that would cause any friction in your mind, right?
Right. Those are the only two that would really stand out, because everybody else has either shown up, been there, or they're probably going to show up today, because it is physicals, right? I mean, and again, this is a Titans organization that guards secrets closer than any entity known to man. I think there's more leaks from the FBI and CIA than there are
Supreme
from
Court. Supreme Court has more leaks.
Yeah, Supreme Court has more leaks. So in my mind, you may not even hear about it. You may have to see it, because I mean, maybe it gets reported on when it's there, or maybe Jim White gets it first or something. He says, "Oh, I saw Derrick Henry around the building," or something like that.
Yeah,
if he's allowed, because
he's in town and actually doing the things. Yeah, which leads us right into an injury question, because during OTAs we saw Robert Woods as a question for minicamp. Of course, we've got Caleb Farley, Robert Woods, and I think Racey McMath was also wearing the yellow penny as well, which of course means they're still going through the protocol of like rehab or whatever the official terminology is. And Christian Fulton was wearing the yellow jersey as well during OTA. So, Aaron Brewer, Nate Davis, Elijah Molden, there's a handful of guys that I think keeping an eye on from an injury standpoint is more important than a lot of the contract stuff.
Yeah, I mean, would be my second biggest issue is, okay, contracts are, let's say they don't even happen, or if they do hold out, the biggest issue is, and this is the focus of what Mike Vrabel and John Robinson and all these guys preach, we can only control the people that are here. We can only coach the people that are here. So what has happened now between last week and this week with Treylon Burks? Where is he at in being able to get through what is going to be, if they don't go inside,
very freaking hot.
They don't go inside the bubble. what is he going to be able to do to handle? This is the worst probably heat going right now. The humidity, it's like walking into bacon grease.
Dude, it's
out
100.
there.
The heat index is 110. If it's that, it's not supposed to go down either.
Yeah.
Like, selfishly, I hope we're in the bubble tomorrow and Wednesday, but I don't know why you would do that to your team, honestly.
Yeah,
like,
well,
I know you want to
that's
like
what
get
I
them
think.
acclimated, but like, why would you do that?
Yeah, because to me, it's probably never going to be as hot in a game situation as it is this week. And why risk it? Because then you got muscle cramps you got to worry about, especially for a team with soft tissue injuries. But it just, I think it opens up a lot of doors for a lot to go wrong to practice outside. You know, Robert Woods, you got Bud Dupree coming back. You know, granted it's not from injury, but you got guys that you haven't seen in a while coming back that are known to have injuries. So Bud Dupree would fall under that. Caleb Farley, what he gets through. But I think that when you look at what is going on and happening at minicamp, it's 2 days, right? And it's probably the most grueling 2 days that they've had yet, more than likely.
Since game week of
Cincinnati.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, and you're looking at it from a perspective of they're going to push a little bit harder, be a little harder on these guys, get them to do a little bit more. So you want them to all walk away without an injury because the injuries do happen at minicamp. I mean, you got, I believe, who went down? I think Teddy Bridgewater went down in that way.
Oh, yeah.
Odell went down that way. I mean, it can happen in non-contact drills just as much as it can at training camp.
Along those lines, then, are you that concerned about who is and who isn't there this week? Like, I'm not concerned about Jeffrey Simmons being like. To your point, now you're making me nervous.
Listen, I'm not concerned about anybody practicing. I think Traylon Burks is really the only guy I'm really interested in. Okay, well, what can he do to get into shape, right? Because that to me is the most interesting one. Now, if Derrick Henry comes for his physical and doesn't participate, do not give a shit.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is like if you're a veteran and you've played, let's say 3 years,
right?
Because that's
especially if you're doing
Simmons.
practice outside. If you're doing practice outside, I'm out. If I'm
right, like I'm kind of like, dude, don't even push them. Like you're talking about how this could be the most strenuous couple of days of practice for a lot of these guys. I think that's really important for guys like Kyle Phillips. And maybe even Mason Kinsey, like a guy who's been in the NFL, but like needs to.
Well, Mason Kinsey's got like an all-pro underneath him in Hall of Fame with the way these guys talk about Mason Kinsey.
I just like there's a difference between, let's call them the top 20 players on the team versus the bottom. And once they extend the roster to 85, let's say, whatever the number is. Like, to me, those other 60 are the ones that need to be out there pushing it. Like, right. I don't need Taylor Lewan pushing it or Nate Davis pushing it or Jeffrey Simmons pushing it or Harold Landry or Kevin Byard. Like, I don't need those guys doing that.
We haven't even talked about, but, Nate Davis hasn't been to any of the offseason programs.
Nothing.
What kind of shape does he show up into?
Yep. I agree.
And that's another question is these guys that have missed all the offseason activities. And Nate Davis, I don't know, in my mind, he's not a vet that has earned that right. I mean, we're talking about he's just year 4, right?
In between, yeah.
He's like, and then because you have Taylor Lewan there and you have Ben Jones there, why isn't the next tenured guy not there? And so in my mind, we don't know what he's doing. Last year, he was hanging out with Roger Saffold in the offseason. Roger Saffold's gone. Who's he hanging out with? What's his workout regimen? We don't know. What's he going to look like when he shows up? And can he make it through without getting out of breath? That's a kind of a topic that we haven't even touched on is the fact that Nate Davis's absence is very peculiar to me.
How about this? I think there'll be more that comes out on that.
Gotcha.
In the next couple of days. And then we'll have a report for you on Thursday. How about that?
Oh,
live on Thursday, 1 p.m. football show. Nate Davis report.
Brought
to you by the Kingston Group, live from the Cast Collective studio with football and other F Word host Zach Lyons at F Words Pod on the Twitters. I do think injuries is a big one. I think the contract stuff is interesting. I think you already mentioned Burks. I think that's really interesting. Obviously, everyone's going to be focused on him. But the rest of the rookies going through their first mandatory minicamp. Malik Willis getting a little bit more comfortable in terms of running team drills. Like they actually had him separated. Basically the third team, we'll call it, roughly speaking, of offense. And they actually had them on different fields last week, where before they would have them kind of next to each other, running the same routes and stuff in the same place.
What about the way that Pat O'Hara talks about Malik Willis to the media? I mean, it's just like he's in love.
he is in love with him, and I do see the difference in even just from like first day of rookie camp.
Yeah, right.
So like I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday, maybe we had practice access. They're like he's doing like the play action drop back, quick turn, plant your feet and throw. Like he's already doing that a little bit better. So I think to see a guy who's willing to work, I think is important.
Right.
I don't think it's changed my opinion of Malik Willis yet. I don't.
Well, it's hard to really change your opinion without seeing it in the game. But I think that is an encouraging sign that he picks up things fairly quickly and implements them on the field. It's one thing for coaches to come out and say, you can talk about like Taywan Taylor. Like everybody said, Taywan Taylor's really improved this and really improved that. And then he's not going to the jug machines. Then he's dropping balls all through practice.
Right.
So he's not really improving and not really focusing on his craft. Right. So there's a big difference between them feeding you bullshit and it not translating, then them giving you what they're giving you in terms of what they've seen from Malik Willis and his progression. You actually seen actionable items and actionable progress. Is it as quick as what you want it? No, but you got to remember he's probably starting at a lower level than what most of the quarterbacks that were in his quarterback class or previous quarterback classes had to work from.
I think what's interesting too is, like you talked about the Titans kind of keeping the secrets, and like if Pat O'Hara or Tim Kelly or Todd Downing, whoever sort of wants to distribute information about Malik Willis, if they were to come out and say like, hey, this is the thing that he wasn't doing well, or we've worked really hard on this thing and now he's better at this thing. I think if you gave us really specific stuff, and maybe they're going to do that, maybe they're not. Odds are that they don't. But if they do, then I think it's not really building hype or putting too much pressure on him. If you just come out and say like, man, the guy's amazing, everything he's doing is perfect, blah, 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 blah. It's almost like doing him a little bit of a disservice, because then you're hyping up because people are going to lose their minds over the quarterback position, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, well, I think they have given us some stuff. They've talked about the pre-snap processing. They've talked about reading the defense, and they've said that he's working on that part and that aspect. And that's something that you may not see on the practice field or whatever. But they are saying that. But they are also saying about his dropbacks, and like you said, that's something that someone mentioned. I don't remember who mentioned it, but someone mentioned in a presser. It may have been Pat, may have been Vrabel, but mentioned that specific taking the snaps and everything. And I look at it this way: if you want answers to those questions, someone's got to ask the questions that really get that out of them. And really, that's comes down to Teron Davenport, who is there every week. I mean, that's the guy that you can probably safely say knows his stuff enough to be able to ask that question that's there at every press conference and be able to get the answer that you're looking for, right?
Yeah, you got to be
in that way.
You have to ask it very specifically of Vrabel, and then you kind of can open up sometimes, but you got to ask it. It's sort of like Belichick, where if you ask the right question about the right thing inside the game, they blossom like a flower.
You can't just say, well, what's Malik improving on? Because then you're just going to get a generic answer because you asked a generic question. Right. If you go back to the tape and, a couple of weeks ago, you said that you guys were really going to work on Malik Willis on this.
Yep.
And I've noticed a little bit of difference from the sidelines. What have you guys noticed or something like that? Or where do you think, okay, you got his steps down. Where do you think is the disconnect between the steps, his lower body and his upper body?
Yep. Yeah. And even then it's like, and you have to do it still open-endedly. You have to make him feel like there's because I think there was one time where I think Teron asked him about like, what did Ryan Tannehill not see on one particular interception or something like that. And this was I think it's late last year. And, Vrabel kind of stopped and he goes, which one are you talking about? Like, and even then it's a really good question. It's a smart question from a guy he already respects. And even then Vrabel was still like pushing him to make sure you mean on the 3rd and 5, like that kind of thing.
Right.
And so you can get Vrabel to open up. It's just very hard. It's just very hard. You have to ask the right question, and it has to be about the right thing. It can't be about injuries. It can't be about broad stuff and, all that kind of stuff. So
do you think someone is going to ask a coach or a player about AJ Brown's tweet?
I hope not.
I wouldn't put it past someone.
I take it back.
To ask Vrabel or ask someone.
I take it back. I hope so.
Yeah, did you see the reaction?
Because I want to see what Vrabel does. Because again, I study press conferences like human psychology, behavior, and I just love watching the interaction and that to see what his face would do.
Would he just combust? Like, I feel like that may be the question that he just leaves.
You know what he'd do is he'd just be like, I talk about the players on our team.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Something like that.
Some kind of stalking.
After a glaring and big sigh, like if there's a big sigh.
Yeah, but he'll have the two hands on the podium.
He breaks the podium off, the little wood.
A wry smile and a little chuckle. And then I talk about players on my team, guys.
Yeah.
I'm actively rooting for that to happen. I'll see if I can get somebody to do that, because I sure as hell am not going to do that. All right, that leads us to position battles, I think, which is one of the only things kind of left in the camp. And again, for as much as
Strictly offensive line, I think, right? Maybe defensive backs.
So here I was gonna ask you and tell me what you think. And I'll go. I got 4 positions for you, and because again, minicamp, everything's the caveat of the minicamp. I think left guard.
Yeah, I think right now, I think people are expecting it to be Aaron Brewer, but I would not discount Jamarco Jones at this point.
Okay, I think that's fair. Right tackle,
and that's a real competition that we know of, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I mean,
right tackle.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much the competition as it was a few weeks ago, because I think that it's Dylan Radins' job to lose.
Okay.
But that does not mean that NPF can't show up at training camp. I don't think in mini camps, maybe not for this particular position battle, but I think, if you're talking about a whole month going by, what can NPF do in a whole month gone by to improve his game, to maybe make a case to say, hey, I know that you guys love Dylan, but I'm that guy.
Okay. What about wide receiver in general? Maybe the organization, maybe the roles, maybe the depth chart, wide receiver?
Yeah, I think at this point, if you were to start, people are going to hate this. If you were to start the day 1, week 1 right now, it's NWI and Robert Woods as your starting wide receivers. And I think people are going to hate that, and people aren't going to understand. But I also think that the first play out of the gate is probably going to be a run play. So those guys will be your run play.
No, yeah.
Maybe a play action, but probably those guys are going to be there for the run blocking purposes. And so that technically means that NWI has little asterisks for the start, right? I mean,
yeah.
But you want to see Traylon Burks get going, right? You want him to see complete practices from Traylon Burks where he doesn't ever have to come off the field.
Yep.
Again, maybe more so a training camp thing, but
I agree with that.
But I think that you want to see some more wide receivers step up. You want to see Des Fitzpatrick step up. You want to see Reggie Roberson has kind of disappeared into the oblivion, which is more than likely would happen with the UDFA. But you want to see the top 5 cement themselves as the top 5, and top 5 for me, in no particular order: Robert Woods, NWI, Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, and Des Fitzpatrick.
Des Fitzpatrick is doing everything better this year than he was last year. It doesn't mean he's elite,
right?
But he's doing everything better. I will say I've come around on your theory on Kyle Phillips, and I was talking to a few people on the field just saying, like, well, who else on this roster outside of Brendan Lewis, who's like 5'4", and Mason Kinsey, who else is going to do for this offense what Kyle Phillips can do? And I think I'm coming around on the 3 of them are going to be battling. And I will say this: Lewis never misses anything. He never drops a pass. He never does a drill incorrectly. Never gets asked to repeat a drill.
Sounds like a Cam Batson kind of guy. Like, and they love.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is they love that guy, right?
Yes,
I mean, they kept Cam Batson around all the time and trusted him in big spots here and there. Specifically in the Dallas game. Then there was a toe touch game that I can't remember who it was against. He's had his moments, but he never could stay healthy, right?
Right.
And so maybe this guy he's
very, very small. Like, he's very small.
Yeah. And Cam Batson was super small too.
He's even smaller than Kinsey and Phillips. Like, and but again, never does anything wrong. Doesn't mean but my point is that I think, and you've said this a couple of weeks ago on the show, where you think Kyle Phillips will play maybe more snaps than anybody else outside of Traylon Burks in this rookie class. And I think I'm coming around on that to some degree, because as you study the roster more and more, watch how they're running routes, watch how their formations are lined up, like all these things, talk to a few people, there's nobody that does what Kyle Phillips and Mason Kinsey do in that offense, at least right now. Doesn't mean that somebody might not show up in camp or whatever, but for right now, it does feel like those 3 are battling for one roster spot, and odds are the guy who was drafted is going to
exactly.
So
and he's supposedly, for all intents and purposes, you may be able to argue with Lewis, has looked the best out of all 3 of them.
No, I think it's Lewis doesn't do anything wrong. He's clearly limited.
Yeah.
Phillips does almost everything right as well, but is a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, a little bit more of everything. And I mean, he and Kinsey they almost look identical. So again, I think Phillips has been more productive in the short times that we've seen him. Cornerback organizational structure. Is that what I was going to ask you for a final position battle here?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because the more I read, I believe the Tennessean put out an article this morning interviewing former defensive coordinator Keith Steele. Yeah, I don't know why I went Kenneth.
Keith Stone.
No, not Keith Stone.
Keith Stone. No free shout. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's an interesting collection of guys.
Yeah, I think he talked about in the article about McCreary nothing phasing him, and to me that is just right up this. I understand now. Maybe I didn't understand in the moment as much as I do now why they drafted McCreary and passed on maybe Malik Willis or passed on NPF is because and other players is because this is a guy that arguably could have been in the first round. And this is a guy that they has the Titans personality that they are looking for on the field. Steely resolve.
It's a good word.
I mean, to me, I'm not saying I don't think Caleb Farley has anything to worry about because I think Caleb Farley and Christian Fulton, their spots are secured barring injury. I think that's the only way those two don't start, really.
Yeah.
Now, McCreary and Molden, they're kind of interchangeable, but if you're talking about that you got the starting offense that you're the Giants come out in 3 wide receiver sets, and your starting cornerbacks are Caleb Farley, Christian Fulton on the outside, and McCreary on the inside. I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, no,
it could be Molden. That'd still be perfectly happy.
I don't know why I was thinking like which NFL coordinator, like you're talking Auburn coordinator,
yes.
Kevin Steele. It was at Tennessee last year. There you go.
Man,
Kevin Steele.
Took us 3 tries to get the K name.
Well, I didn't realize. I was like, who worked for the Titans? His last name was Steele. I was like trying to go. I don't know why I didn't think about Auburn. No, I think that, and I think you've said this on F Word Spot before too, which is that the NFL is going to have 3 and 4 wide receiver sets from now on for the rest of time.
Right.
Like until a rule change happens, this is where the game is, and you need at least 4 of them. That's it. And Elijah Molden does one thing a little differently than Roger McCreary does. Roger McCreary does something a little different than Caleb Farley, and Christian Fulton does something a little different. I think all 4 of them are very talented. They're all high-level draft picks.
And they're all super young.
And they're all very young
that's the thing.
And cheap.
And look at it this way, you talk about contract negotiations and all this kind of stuff. That's, we were harping on it. Christian Fulton will be coming up for one soon. If McCreary turns out, well, Christian Fulton then and Caleb Farley, if Caleb Farley, McCreary, and Molden all keep trending the way that they should be trending, then buy Christian Fulton after your first contract.
A really good problem to have. If all 4 of them are worth a second contract, great problem to have. And again, this will feed into our conversation about where the Titans are on the radar, because I think the defense is exceptional. So I don't even know if the cornerback position is a position battle.
It's kind of like wide receiver for me.
Yeah, it's just organizational.
It's just like who's getting. And I think that more so than wide receivers, I think they are matchup dependent, and that's what they want. Yep. They want to be able to be a defense that's matchup dependent. They want versatility, right? That's part of it, is to be able to say, okay, well, they're lining up in this. Here's our matchup. They're dead.
Yep. Coverage consistency and front multiplicity. Yeah. There you go. So that's sort of what we're looking at for minicamp. It's the rookies. It's Treylon Burks. It's the guys with contracts.
Nobody's really covering minicamp, by the way. Minicamp storylines, and I get it's just 2 days, but hey, again, that's football. Why you come here.
We got football. A couple of position battles, and of course some injuries. I do think the cornerback discussion that we just had for 30 seconds or whatever leads us into conversation about where these teams are from an expectation standpoint heading into the season. And I'm going to include some SEC teams in this conversation. And this basically, I was asked a question on a radio show about, like, are the Vols under the radar, which is a generic summer question that happens all the time. And I was like, how can they be under the radar if they're preseason number 20 or number 18, preseason top 20 team in college football? So that's not really under the radar. But it got me thinking about the Titans, and I think about their depth chart on defense, a conversation we just had. And I think we kind of agree that the defense is going to be ridiculously good.
Right.
And to me, that makes them, again, one of the favorites to win the division, if not the favorite to win the division. I know Vegas has the Colts as a slight favorite, but where are the Titans on the radar in your opinion? Because I think I could argue they are being undervalued right now by the football group think.
Well, I think if you include fans in the group think, I'm right there with you. I think almost everybody, I'd say about 80% of the football world, fans, owners, GMs, coaches, players, the national media, the local media, anybody that
include Vegas in this.
I mean, oh yeah, I'm include Vegas knows nothing in my opinion.
Oh.
That if they that's why sometimes the house loses, right? They're not infallible.
Is Casino de Lions opening up soon?
No,
because if you know more than Vegas, then I'll come shop at your book.
Well, I mean, I have beaten Vegas before, so I mean, I think that it's a case by case basis. But I mean, when we're talking about a 12-win team, like we talked about this last week, when you're talking about Mike Vrabel, you're talking about a 12-win team last year that started 91 different players, and there's no way that this team is worse in my mind. The defense got better.
Okay.
Derek, and because everybody is, when you are doing these preseason evaluations, it's under the assumption that the team stays healthy, right? I mean, everybody's making these picks based on, nobody's saying
Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, you change your opinion of the package.
Yeah, nobody's saying that, oh, well, I expect Derrick Henry to get injured by week 6, so this is why I've chosen this. So it's under the assumption that every roster that you see right now in its current form stays healthy, and they play to their best of their ability, their ceilings that we have seen. So if this defense plays to the ceiling that we have seen, and probably will exceed it, right? I think that's a safe assumption. This defense has a chance to be even better than last year. And you look at the offense, and you look at a healthy Ryan Tannehill that has more pass catchers around him,
and Tim Kelly,
you
like to point out,
yes, and you have a fully healthy Derrick Henry. Why can't this team do what it did last year?
Better tight end.
In my mind, I get that it's a different kind of schedule, but in my mind, I'm thinking if they can do what they did last year, they're still a double-digit win team. Maybe not 12, but maybe 11s.
And so Vegas has their over-under at 9.5, basically.
Yeah.
Which means if you are betting on the under, you're betting on them being 3 games worse than last year.
Right.
And that feels hard to believe for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I'm running to the book and putting like thousands of dollars down on the over. I would bet the over, though. I think 10, 11 wins is absolutely doable. But the under seems stupid to me. It seems irrational to say that this team is going to take 3 games back, 3 steps back. So to me, I think exactly what you're saying. The entire thing is undervaluing this Titans team, in my opinion.
I think they're totally forgotten and undervalued, and they're boring. Like, let's be honest here. True. I mean, that we cover them. But if you could start with a clean slate, would you really pick to cover the Titans out of all 32 NFL teams?
If you're trying to like be the embrace debate, drive enragement person, no, you're going to go Cowboys.
Right. So, I mean, they're a boring team. So I get it. I think that the national media has proven that they're woefully uneducated about the Titans. And
because they're not interesting.
Yeah.
Like, that's the things. They're super interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, the way the offense is evolving, the defensive picks, Robinson's draft picks, like Vrabel's personality, everything's interesting,
defense, right? I mean, like we're probably one of the few shows that actually appreciates defense. Everybody's about the glitz, the glamour. The Russell Wilson is over in Denver, and now magically, because he's in Denver, he'll never crumble in November and December. You know,
he has won a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Oh, well, how long ago? And did he win it, or did that Legion of Boom win it?
No.
See, that's something that's often forgotten about when the Russell Wilson talk is that the Legion of Boom dropped the hammer on Denver in that game. I mean, that defense just had...
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah, and
Russell Wilson didn't need to do much in that game.
Exactly.
Peyton Manning...
When you talk about... Let me say this. When we talk about subpar quarterbacks that won the Super Bowl, and
you're going to include Russell Wilson?
Back then, at the time that it was, he is not the quarterback that he is today. So you cannot place the label the Russell Wilson today on that the Super Bowl.
That's fair.
Right?
I would say that's like, I would use Peyton Manning as an example of that as well. Peyton Manning had a dead arm when he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because his defense was elite,
right,
with Denver, and so when he got his second one, he was clearly not the set. Like, this is what I think is going to be so fascinating about Matt Ryan. Like if Matt Ryan is still Matt Ryan, then I think it's a huge upgrade on Carson Wentz, and the Colts are going to be dangerous again, and they could compete in the division. If Matt Ryan's arm is dead, then it's not the same player, and the Colts aren't going to be as good as people think.
But it's also, to me, like, this whole Matt Ryan thing is Carson Wentz wasn't as terrible as everybody wants to put. Now, he had moments. Yeah, he had moments where it was awful, but they basically protected their team from Carson Wentz, for most of the year. I think people are going to put too much emphasis. And nobody's talking about Darius Leonard, by the way. In all of this talk, Darius Leonard, who just had back surgery, who's had ankle issues, he's supposedly going to be okay. But apparently Derrick Henry, who is out, lifting Mack trucks, one in each hand, is not.
Well, while running up a hill, carrying Mack trucks up a hill.
Right.
No, I think the Titans are underappreciated. I think Vegas is undervaluing them. I think there's a few teams in the SEC that would qualify as this. Tennessee Volunteers would not. Like, LSU to me qualifies as an under the radar team because Vegas has their over under at like 6.5. They're not ranked in the preseason top 25. I think that's an undervalued team. I think Mississippi State is an undervalued team. I think there's teams that qualify as sort of undervalued. but I don't think the Tennessee Volunteers qualify as that, which makes the summer so much more interesting to me studying Josh Heupel, because that's not where this organization was last year when they came in with no expectations, no pressure, no nothing, no quarterback, no nothing. And so he just kind of cruised through the summer months, cruised into camp. They changed quarterbacks in the Pitt game. They lose to Pittsburgh. Like, there was under the radar was last year.
Right.
That's out the window now for Tennessee. They're a preseason top 20 team. So I don't know. I don't know how you feel, but if you're ranked in the top 25, you can't be considered sneaking up on people or underappreciated or undervalued or under the radar.
I mean, they're they're probably on paper the fourth best team in the SEC. I mean, when you're
that's
above,
how we have them ranked.
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now.
when you're above well above the demarcation line for above average or below average, or your top teams and your subpar teams, you can't be flying under the radar. Could they be underappreciated? Maybe people aren't. To me, like I said a couple weeks ago, I think that UT has a really good shot at winning, their division.
Yeah, I can't go that far with you.
Yeah. I know you can only go a little bit, but
Georgia is going to go 12-0.
Yeah, I like Herndon Hooker's ability.
We do know a Herndon that you like.
Yeah. I like his abilities, and I think we downplay how well Coach Josh did with limiting his mistakes. While he had a lot of wild misses, he didn't have a lot of turnover.
Incredibly efficient. Yeah. There's no question.
And I think that people are starting to catch on in the draft world on Twitter. I see a lot of Hooker highlights and a lot of
second rounder right now.
Yeah, I think that's a guy that can do a lot of good for his brand if he puts up a year similar to what he did last year with a few key improvements.
I'm not sure I see the NFL like physical skills there, the efficiency and the leadership and all those other things. Like, it's absolutely there. My question is like, and again, this is the problem with Josh Heupel's offense. Just ask Drew Lock about this. That Josh Heupel was Drew Lock's quarterback offensive coordinator at Missouri, and that the offense is too simple for NFL players. Like, they have to, now, if you're good enough, doesn't matter. But at some point, I need to see him do like the step back, plant and throw thing. Like, he can chuck it down the field. They split out super wide. I think the offense is really good and gives them a good floor. I think 8-4 is a good floor. 7-5 a good floor. I think 10-2 is their ceiling because Georgia and Alabama. But again, if that would require Tennessee to be perfect, which doesn't happen very often for Tennessee fans. So I think 9-3 would be an extraordinary year. And there's no way that's under the radar because, again, we're picking them top 20 in the preseason. Again, LSU, Arkansas, Kentucky, Florida, Mississippi State. These teams are all not that much different than Tennessee. And Tennessee, we're picking ahead of all of them.
Right. And comfortably, I feel like.
Yeah. So, like, to me, it's not – it's the LSU road trip. It's the Kentucky home game. It's the South Carolina road game. It's those middle swing games that will define the season for Tennessee.
Well, and that's the thing about Tennessee fans, though. They want – I think there's a little bit of them where they have little man syndrome when it comes to all this stuff that's being talked about and everything. And I think some of them like to be the underdog, though. I think. I think the
Titans like it.
Yeah, I think the Titans do like it. I agree with you. But I think, is like one of those comments from the Notre Dame pitcher or outfielder, whatever he was, and everybody's like, "Oh, the Ramon and Ron
too soon. Zach.
Spent all Friday talking about.
Too soon, Zach.
Can't believe they gave him bulletin board material and blah blah blah." Like,
and all they did was just mash.
And that was just the most innocuous comment ever. It's like, "Oh, I think they kind of should be afraid of us." And he sounds like Yeah,
you're asking like an athlete to never be confident they're going to win a game. Like, what do you expect them to say? Like, no, I don't think we can win.
Yeah. And I guess UT should have been scared of it.
They shrunk again in the last game of that season. So that's 2 years in a row. Tony Vitello's squad has shrunk with the bright spotlight on them in the final game. I just think, and going back to quickly with the Titans, I think Vrabel, and he probably won't ever come out and say this because I've talked to college coaches that just say it outright. They say, yeah, we love having the chip on our shoulder. Yeah. We love being disrespected. Nick Saban said rat poison 1 million times. Kirby Smart's done that. Don't tell me it's not a part of motivation.
Right.
Don't tell me it's not a part of human beings. And I think Vrabel and the Titans love the fact that the Colts are the favorite to win the division. Like, they're going to, you don't think they're going to put that up somewhere? Not like physically on a bulletin board, but like, you don't think they're having those conversations about how people aren't believing in you? X, Y, and Z. I think that the Titans thrive in that situation. We're going to find out if Tennessee can thrive when they have expectations.
Yeah, because that's what it is, right? Yes. I mean, the UT has expectations on them for the first time in a long time. credible expectations, because I feel like fans have
Yeah.
put undue expectations on them in previous years, especially Jeremy Pruitt and Butch Jones years in certain years.
And they still won 9 games twice under
Yeah.
Butch, by the way, which is crazy to think about.
Right. And I think that there are now legit expectations, and I think that they will meet those expectations because I think they're a legitimately good team, and legitimately good teams cannot, for the most part, in this particular instance, when you have a ranking system that is tangible data driven evidence, right? I mean, like as data compiled of votes, nobody's discounting the UT Volunteers.
No, not at all. In fact, you're the one hyping them up.
I'm hyping them.
You're the one saying they can contend for the East Division with the Georgia Bulldogs.
I just hate Georgia at this point.
Is that because all goes back to the championship game? That's it?
Yeah,
or just in general?
Been annoyed by Georgia.
Annoyed by Georgia. Georgia doesn't really do much, and like they're the opposite of AJ Brown. Like they stay off Twitter.
Yeah,
they don't like. They're kind of chill. Like Georgia's a very likable program. I feel like.
No, I don't know.
Okay,
not for me.
They beat Alabama in the championship game. All right, so some players that are going to elevate their status will end the show today. By the way, special thanks to Kingston Group for supporting us here on the program. BuildKG.com is the website. Got football and other F Words podcasts. All the other great shows, of course, across the 440 Sports Network. You got a bunch of other shows from Broadway Sports, Vandy Sports as well. You got the YouTube page, notifications. We appreciate all your guys' support, as well as Cast Collective Studio here. So I'm getting all the bills paid here before we get into our final topic, which is players that you like to level up this year. And we can you can define that however you want to define that. I think Pro Bowl sometimes is a little, I don't want to say inaccurate. It's not the right word, but Pro Bowl sometimes isn't. I don't know. Doesn't give me the exact definition I want. I just want.
I look at it this way: who on this team, offense or defense, is going to become a household name for this Titans team? Who's going to get those votes, that recognition out there? Because the reason that they are getting that recognition and those votes or names, or you're seeing them on highlight reels, because they're playing exceptionally well compared to what they have been.
So I think that's how I would define it inside my head. And I would say I would put a little caveat on that, which is getting the recognition from smart people who know the team.
Yeah.
Right. Like not the regular Twitter bro who doesn't know that right guards are very important.
Yeah.
It's like Nate Davis is a guy I would pick as a part of this conversation, where I think could be a guy who is getting recognition for his play at right guard, but is not going to make highlights or Sports Center or, whatever. So like, to me, Nate Davis is a perfect example of a guy that maybe he doesn't get voted all pro or Pro Bowl.
He has got one all pro vote under his belt.
But I think a guy that's going to be a star, like as big as a star at right guard can be.
Right.
If that makes sense. So who you got?
I'm going David Long. I've
got him written down.
Yeah. I've been on the David Long train for a while now. I think that now that he is squarely the starting guy, it's obvious. It's him and Zach Cunningham, right?
Yep.
It's obvious. He's talking about taking leadership roles. He's talking about being more vocal. He is talking,
which is not his.
It was not his forte. He's getting out of his comfort zone. To me, the play has been there. The opportunities maybe hasn't. If he stays healthy, you're talking about a guy. Remember when I'm thinking of Levante David, or maybe it was who's Alexander?
Quan Alexander.
Quan Alexander. When those two guys kind of just popped up out of nowhere, right? They kind of had been here for a little bit, and they kind of just slowly got better and better. But then they popped up, and they were considered like one of the best linebackers.
Wasn't Alexander was he first round pick? Second round?
I don't know. That doesn't really matter. It factored into my story, because first round picks can suck and then suddenly turn it on later. That's what I'm talking about. And I think that David Long is that guy that is going to be that linebacker that everybody's talking about, that's saying, oh, you got to watch this play. He's always around the ball. He makes his tackle, or he's got a chance to make interceptions, to get fumbles. They're practicing knocking the ball out, at training camp, which they always do anyway. But I think that you're talking about a guy that has all the physical talents, has the personality trait. He's in a defense that's going to feature him a lot at this point. He has no real competition behind him. I think that David Long has a good chance to make that leap, level up, and even get into a Pro Bowl, maybe even earn some all-pro votes.
I could be on board with that. A couple of first of all, Monty Rice, by the way, a name we have not discussed at all at any point during any of these camp conversations for the last 3 weeks or so. So maybe we see him on the field this week or not. He is right now the backup to both of those guys at this point. Right. So pretty critical that he's producing. I think I agree with you 1,000,000% if David Long is on the field
Yeah, he's
every field.
got to be healthy
because he's a little guy relative to his position. I will say, was it the Colts game? And this is not meant to be cast aspersion on the boy, but was it the Colts game like 2 years ago, maybe at the end of the year, where Jayon Brown gets hurt and is out, and
It was
they bring in Will Compton
Yeah.
for like 2 series, and then after 2 series, they were like, "Sorry, man, David Long," and they put David Long in, and David Long was just everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was one of those where you're like, "All right," and he was a West Virginia kid, and he's super active, physical, can do everything they ask him to do.
He more than
Can he stay healthy is the question.
Yeah, he's got to stay healthy, and he's more than likely a 3-down linebacker for the team.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, you're going to take Zach Cunningham off in obvious passing situations on 3rd down,
or shift him maybe,
and you're going to take him off.
I mean,
I don't think you're going to.
You're not going to
shift him to.
Well, I'm just saying, if you want to run, keep him on the field and then use him as a pass rusher.
Yeah, but then you would just use your actual pass rushers.
I tend to agree. Maybe you remove the lineman.
This is like the Rashaan Evans. Like, why didn't they ever try Rashaan Evans at edge? Like,
and I'm not saying
kind of like that. That's kind of like that.
Well, Cunningham has a track record of getting to the quarterback a little bit more than Rashaan Evans does. But I see your point. I agree with you on David Long. I'm with you on that one. I would like to sort of just say the entire secondary, but like Kevin Byard's already in all everything. We've kind of talked about Christian Fulton. I think Christian Fulton could be an all-pro, like that level good. Yeah. So if that counts as leveling up, I'd include him. I think Elijah Molden is going to get some recognition.
I think Elijah Molden is going to get some major recognition. Who's going to be my next one?
That was one of my favorite draft picks of the last 3 or 4 classes, was going out and getting a guy that plays that position. And you could see it literally from the very first practice in camp last year, that he knows what he's doing, that he knows exactly how the scheme is. He knows his strength. More importantly, this is another thing that maybe we don't talk about with players, knowing who they are and their own weaknesses. Like, he knows what he's not.
Right.
He knows he's not an outside corner that's going to line up and jam Tyreek Hill and then run with him. Like, that's not what he does. But what he does very, very well.
Right.
And so I'm with you on Molden. I think Amani Hooker could be in this conversation.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true.
The physicality, the size, the speed, learning beside Kevin Byard. He's now, his 3rd year as the starter, right? So this is a guy who tackles incredibly well in space. Like, I like everything Amani Hooker does. So I kind of want to just broad brush the secondary and say, much along the lines
You'll probably have 2 or 3 people getting a lot of recognition in the secondary.
If the defense is
including Kevin Byard.
Yes. If the defense is as good as you and I think it is.
Right.
And obviously we can't really include Bud Dupree or Jeffrey Simmons or Harold Landry. They've already done that. If the defense is as good as you and I think, then David Long, Elijah Molden, Christian Fulton, Amani Hooker are all going to be pretty darn good players.
Yeah.
So one of them is going to, or if not 2, will be elevated up.
I'm gonna throw a name out there,
all right,
and I think Austin Hooper, needs to be included in this, because you're talking about a guy who's probably going to rack up a lot of red zone touchdowns. He's going to block, he's going to catch passes, and the offense is going to improve exponentially compared to last year, just because of his presence of being way better than anything that they had last year.
And there's not a lot of options on the offense, honestly.
Right. That he's the one guy besides maybe Nate Davis that can take a step, because Lawan's already been there, right?
Well, Ben Jones is like he is.
Yeah, Ben Jones is who he is, and he's gotten all-pro votes, and he's gotten his recognition. I think
Nick Westbrook-Akine.
I just don't think the stats will be there.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Austin Hooper, for the position that he plays, he'll get the stats, he'll get the looks, he'll get the touchdowns, he'll make the acrobatic catches. Him and Tannehill are looking on the same page, making great grabs. Tannehill's throwing a beautiful ball to only Austin Hooper can get it, and he's making the catches, not dropping them. I think that goes a long way when you're talking about a guy who was on the radar of a lot of these scouts a couple years ago, kind of fell off. So he's also got the kind of recognizable name in his favor too. So when you're talking about a guy, it's always good to have. He may have, but I think he's gonna. I think maybe probably was an alternate. Maybe
I agree with you on this.
Yeah,
like I agree with you on this because of like the spot that he plays on the team, all the things you just said, and if he goes for like 45 catches for like 500 yards and like, but he racks up red zone touchdowns, then he's going to be a guy that's going to get votes for a Pro Bowl.
Right.
So again, Pro Bowl votes are not the end all be all. It's not the thing that defines you, who you are or whatever. But this is a guy who signed a big contract, didn't live up to it, not necessarily of his own doing, some injury stuff. But if
he has been 2 Pro Bowls, but he
bouncing
still
back
has
to
a
that
chance to level up. Yeah,
no, I totally agree with you. There's not a lot of guys on. I mean, unless Robert Woods were to become a true number 1. And catch like 80 passes for 1,200 yards or something.
People talk about Derrick Henry being comeback player of the year. There's a good chance that Robert Woods could be that guy too.
Yeah, I tend to get Nate Davis would be my number one vote on offense, but I'm with you on Hooper.
Yeah.
I could get behind that. Point is the defense going to be really good.
Yes. I mean, I figured most of the stuff was going to come from the defense.
God, they're going to be so good. I just 9.5 wins seems so stupid to me. Like,
Yeah.
just take the over on that. Put a few bucks down.
Yeah.
Don't blame us if you lose, but like
You won't lose unless something catastrophic happens.
Well, yep, we'll knock on the wooden table here. I think that just about does it for us. Of course, stay out of the AJ Brown Twitter sewers. All right, I don't know what else that we need to say about AJ Brown. It's hopefully we've said it all. I know you're very tired of it.
Yeah, I'm wishing there was some way we could work around not having to talk about it on Football and Other F words.
Can you try to not use the name? Can you do that?
We could try, maybe.
Tune in. Football and Other F words, of course. Everywhere you get your podcasts. Big Lebowski, Mr. Lebowski, I should say. He is a Big Lebowski, but Mr. Lebowski and Zach Lyons, of course, Broadway Sports Media. You've got the Gold Standard podcast covering the Preds with Adam Vingan and myself. We've got Fringe Element with Aaron Dugan, who, of course, owns this big, beautiful studio here, Cast Collective. Make sure you check them out. Cast_Collective on the Instagram. Kingston Group, our primary sponsor for supporting us. You guys go out and call them. BuildKG.com is the website. Special thanks to all you guys hanging out with us and listening. We love you all. We'll be back on Thursday, 1 p.m. live across all the platforms. Turn all the notifications on and share the product with your buddies or your enemies. For Zach, I'm Braden. This has been a football show.